So yes, I'm going to be talking about how I learned to stop worrying and love speaking at conferences. Okay, I probably don't need to point out that I do worry and I don't love speaking at conferences, but I've learned to sort of like accept it and kind of enjoy it, sort of. So yeah, I can't see my slides down here, so that's why I'm turning around. 2007 was the first time I spoke at a conference. And so that's me in 2007, very contrasty, and starting next to Mary Gardner, who makes me look like even more of an elf than I normally do. And the way I ended up speaking at linux.conf 2007 was that I was there because my boyfriend was one of the organizers, and so I just sort of went along, and then Leslie Hawthorne, who looks like that, so you get a bit of a sense of what her character is like from this photo. I think this is a wonderful portrait. Persuaded me that I should give a lightning talk at what was then called the Linux Chicks Microconference, now called the Haxon Microconference. And I was sort of like, oh, I don't really want to, but okay, you're a very persuasive person, and you're offering to sit next to me and essentially hold my hand and do bunny hand puppets. And that sounded so amusing that I couldn't really say no. So I did my first lightning talk. I think it was supposed to be 5 minutes. I probably completed it in about a minute because I was talking so fast and shaking so hard. But I managed to get through it. So the next year I did a few things. I did a 4-slide lightning talk at a work offsite. And this was one of the ones where the unthinkable happened and I really did just completely blank out. I was talking and then all of a sudden I wasn't talking. I couldn't remember what I was about to say. I don't know that I could remember my name. It was very, very horrible. And then somehow I just kept going. I possibly got distracted by the fact that I put a lolcat in my slides, which is one of the main reasons I wanted to give the talk in the first place. So I was going through this to see like how much public speaking have I actually done, because I kind of feel like I've done a bit, but I don't really know when it all was. So it was kind of interesting to go through and like figure it all out. So I gave a presentation at work for a design review. So that was sort of like public speaking, but within work. And I gave a tech talk at an event called Go Girl, Go for IT in Melbourne, which is an event aimed at high school aged girls, so years 9, 10, 11, I think, to introduce them. So similar sort of audience to Rebecca Girls, to introduce girls to the idea that information technology is an interesting field. It's something they might be interesting if they haven't necessarily been exposed to it. And I have to say, having high school girls as your audience is a bit of a mixed bag. So because on the one hand, they're high school girls and I found them scary when I was in high school and I still find them a bit scary. But on the other hand, they're not going to know if you don't know stuff because they know a lot less than you do. So that's sort of very comforting. All right, 2009, I accepted an invitation to speak at Ignite Melbourne. And as we were saying earlier, Ignite is a very interesting experience because your slides auto-advance every 15 seconds. It's a 5-minute talk. It's very punchy. It's very short. That thing took me an entire weekend to write. Like, I did nothing else that weekend. And it was on safe spaces online for women. So I really was putting myself out there. And this is one of the slides from the talk, which was proving a point that Slashdot is not a very friendly place for women. But I had people come up to me afterwards and say, you really made me see things in a whole different way that I never thought of before. So that was a really amazing experience. 2010, I gave a tech talk at a Anita Borg Scholarship Retreat. So Anita Borg Scholarship is a scholarship for women in technology run by Google, where we try and find women who might be potential leaders of other women in technology. So it's a really great event to attend because these are some really seriously inspiring people. So getting to give that to them and have them like tell me afterwards how inspiring they found it was, again, a really, really fabulous experience. 2011, I co-presented with Sylvia Pfeiffer, who many of you probably know, at a Google Developer Day. That was a really good experience as well because I got to learn a lot from her. And then I gave a pretty similar talk at linux.conf.au 2012, again with Sylvia. And then someone at that conference persuaded me that I should submit that talk by myself to OzCon that year. So I was like, okay, because I'd really like to go to Portland. So I submitted my talk, I got accepted, it was fabulous, I got to go to OzCon. I think I gave my 45-minute talk in 30 minutes because I did the fast talking thing again. I think I had about 3 cups of coffee that day because I stayed up really late writing my talk. So that was a bad idea, but I didn't die. And this year I got to go to OzCon again, which was awesome, and I also got to speak at ChromeConf, which was pretty alarming because it was like a pretty big international audience. And also I had a really terrible cold. So that was also not the greatest speaking experience ever, but it did lead to me getting an invitation to speak at Edge Conference in London next year. And here I am again at linux.conf, speaking at Haxon, so full circle, and I'm speaking at the main conference by myself for the first time this year. So thank you. Awesome. But still, like, I'm not even the most experienced speaker in this room. I have some idea what I'm doing. Like, this is probably overstating it a bit again, but I just really love the no idea talk. But still, like, I'm still really learning it as I go. But because of all this public speaking and scary stuff, I've gotten to travel. I've gotten to go to Portland, I've gotten to go to California, I've gotten to come back here from California now that I live there. I've gotten to meet cool people, like any number of them. I've gotten to go to conferences. I have gotten to educate and inspire people about the things that I care about. This is like the #1 perk that people don't often actually mention. And for me, I get to walk the walk of something that I really care about, which is having more women speak at tech conferences. All right, so being a speaker means often you get a whole bunch of great perks. So at linux.conf especially, they treat speakers really well. You get free registration, you get free accommodation if you want it. Sometimes, I know OzCon, you get better swag, so I got this really cool little travel powerboard thing. Sometimes linux.conf will even give you free flights in certain circumstances. And you get to hang out with the other speakers, so there's often speaker-only events, so you get to meet all the interesting speaker people. It benefits your career, like, absolutely. For one thing, you get to be more visible. You're all looking at me, you all know my name now. This also works within work, so within your company, it means that people will approach you and give you opportunities or ask your opinion on things, you get more reputation and so on. Networking. So again, being here, you've all seen me, you all know my face. If you have questions, hopefully you'll come up and ask me afterwards and I'll get to meet more interesting people. All right, so other benefits of public speaking. Hello? So learning public speaking is just a generally useful skill. You'll never know when you need to actually give a presentation on something or sort of need to persuade someone or just be in a situation where it's going to be useful. And another thing that people seldom mention is it actually forces you to learn more about the thing that you're talking about. So especially the presentations, the tech talks that I've given on campus, the Google Developer Day talk, I sort of like agreed to do the talk and then realized that I knew nothing about it. And so I was like, oh, okay, I have to go and actually learn these things now so that I can actually give this talk. And if someone asks a question, there's like a decent chance that I'll be able to answer it. I was just like pressing the keyboard then without realizing. Cool. All right. So those are like the sort of the selfish benefits. We have the enlightened self-interest benefits. And this applies really mostly to women. So I was figuring there'd be more women here. I don't know what's happening with this audience, but it's great to see you all anyway. So as I was saying, like being able to walk the walk of having more women and speaking at tech conferences, I think is a really important thing. And it's because of things like this. Like this news article that came out recently about stuff that Paul Graham has been saying, where he just obviously doesn't get that women can actually be programmers. So as a woman, I really like being able to give organizers no excuse. And also just like a lot of organizers I know really do want to have women speakers and women just don't put their hand up. Or sort of like, as Karen was saying, can be sort of like try and actually actively push off this opportunity. So not living that stereotype, being visible, like just being counted, standing up here and being like, actually, we're not all men. And defying these stereotypes that people still have in 2014, which is just completely unbelievable. All right, so how do you actually do it? So we've had a couple of talks, and I'm not really going to cover any new stuff, but I'll walk you through my take on it. So first thing is to recruit a support crew. So I had Leslie Hawthorne. I've also, my last slide is a whole bunch of people who have helped me, so I'll get to that later. But having someone who will actually just give you that push on stage and say, actually, you can do this to your face, potentially help you write slides, but it doesn't even need to be an experienced presenter. It could be someone that you want to inspire or you want to be a role model to who believes in you. I just need to page down in my slide, my notes. And I can't because the mouse is gone. There we go. Nope, not going to work. All right. And yeah, so like in this room is probably a great place to start, or definitely at this conference. There's a lot of really friendly people here who really want to help you, and I, would be happy to help any of you. Finding a safe space to start. So for me, again, this was pretty much in this room 7 years ago. But in general linux.conf, as we've said, is a really friendly place, really supportive audience, really good place to start. Alternatively, giving a demo for your team at work is sort of a pretty safe place because they already know you, they're not going to push you too hard. Hopefully your team are like quite friendly. Or a friendly user group. If you have a user group that you go to that you're quite comfortable with, and potentially if such a user group doesn't exist, maybe you need to start one in your area. So this is optional, but finding a co-presenter. So I did, like I said, I did a couple of talks with Sylvia Pfeiffer. Working with another person gives you quite a few benefits. Firstly, she helped me write the talk. She has a wealth of experience in speaking about open technology, but it also meant that I got to sort of share the spotlight, and so I could sort of console myself that at least she was up there with me. And she sort of like helped calm my nerves quite a lot. So that was a really good experience. And remember that it's okay, it's totally normal to be scared. Your brain plays tricks on you, as we all know. It's going to tell you that if you go up there and speak in public, your worst fears are going to come true. You're not only going to like shake and stall and not be able to answer a question, but you might actually choke on your own tongue and die. But it's not going to happen. Like really, as we were saying, the worst thing, what's going on? Oh yeah. The worst thing that can happen is that really, in the vast majority of cases, you're going to stumble over your words a bit, you're going to maybe pause for a second. There's going to be a question that you can't quite answer, and that's all actually fine. So yeah, this is a quote from Pia Waugh from yesterday, actually, we were talking about this. And she was saying she used to shake so hard when she first started speaking that she had to physically hide her legs so that people couldn't see just how badly her knees were knocking. All right, so I just have to mention imposter syndrome, which we've talked about a bit. I liked this. I found this on Wikimedia Commons. The amazing imposter was this Mary Miles Minter. I don't know who she is. So my take on imposter syndrome is like, as Karen was saying, like I still feel it. She still feels it. Pretty much, especially women who you admire, but probably a lot of the men that you admire as well, they still feel it. But they're still doing awesome things. So the fact that you're feeling it doesn't mean that it's true. And that's like, I try to keep that in mind and just like, even while I'm standing up here going, oh God, I'm such an idiot. Why is anyone even listening to me? Like, just push through it and do what you're doing. Don't let it stop you doing awesome things. And there's a great write-up on the Geek Feminism Wiki on a whole lot of different strategies that you can use to conquer imposter syndrome. All right, so actually writing your talk. This is pretty much how I do it. So when I found out like maybe 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago that I was giving this talk. I wrote it on the plane on the way here. So I wrote some notes on the plane on the way here. I wrote my slides this morning. Like, this is a terrible idea, but it got the job done. So ideally, you start off by, so I genuinely did start thinking about it when I first heard that I was going to do it. I sort of like, this is my process. So I'll sort of like, I'll think about it, and while I'm thinking about it, I'll picture my audience and start like coming up with phrases in my head that I can imagine saying, thinking about the points that I want to make and the things that I want to persuade you of, and like roughly what the talk structure is going to look like. That made it a lot easier to actually write when I actually finally sat down to write it. So then the next step for me is writing an outline, which I like doing because have you ever made a list for packing before you packed? Yes. It just makes it so much easier. Like, packing without a list is just like, oh no, and then you get there and you've forgotten your shampoo. You're like, oh man. But if you, writing an outline means that you can just sit down and effectively write your slides. You just like sit there and write them out. It's much simpler. Okay, so then write slides, and as we've all been saying, practice if possible. So you don't necessarily need to practice out loud, but it helps to at least run through your slides and sort of like practice in your head. It is better if you practice out loud, particularly in front of an audience that can give you feedback. So for really important talks, that's what I do now. It's really, really helpful getting people actually critiquing your talk and telling you ways that you can improve it because, hey, it improves it. But at least like flicking through your slide set a couple of times before you actually give the talk is going to be the next best thing. Okay, so just quickly on writing slides, definitely write slides. It helps you to actually keep up, remember what you were going to say. It's a good resource for people to look at later if they want to sort of like recap on what you said. But don't stress too much about it, especially if your talk is going to be in like a safe space, if it's like an early talk for you, if you're not keynoting, if you're not trying to actually sell something to someone, don't stress too much about it. There's a whole bunch of slide best practices that you can go and look up, and they really do work and they're a good idea. But the main point is just to get some form of your ideas into some form that people can look at while you're talking. And just wanted to make a shout out for Wikimedia Commons for freely available images that you can use in your slides, and a lot of them are really, really good. All right, so just, back to this idea. When you're presenting, it's okay, it's totally normal to be scared and to be shaking, and it doesn't mean that any of your fears are actually going to come true. And again, this imposter syndrome idea, you might feel like you have no idea what you're doing. That's not actually true either. Like, by this time, you've thought about your talk, you've written it, you've made slides, you've hopefully run through them a few times. You have learned the topic that you're talking about because you've like frantically brushed up on it because you have to give this talk. And once you've given your first talk, it gets easier. You have like, the first talk is a practice for the next talk, which is a practice for the next talk. And you develop your skills, and it just gets easier every single time. Like, I'm still nervous, but I'm a lot less nervous than I was the first time. And it's totally worth it for all of the reasons that I said earlier. And just finally, thank you to a whole bunch of people who have helped me get to this point. Yeah. Oh yeah, so I meant to ask earlier, does anyone have any tips they want to share for speaking that they have learned that we haven't already heard?
About what you said with the it gets easier, I found when I started giving technical presentations, it suddenly started getting a lot harder. It's harder than, say, once in school. But then there was one thing where I briefly spoke and it just became so much easier really suddenly. It was at the 2013 Police Australia AGM. Someone asked a question that the two council members who were talking couldn't answer, and I'd done it, so I got up and said it, and then realised I just spoke in front of all those people on these live streams. And I didn't think about it, I just went, I know that.
think that's
And
what
it
you
became
said.
so much easier after that.
That's what you said about confidence in what you know, in the course material. If you can think about something and say, oh, I know that.
Yeah,
I know that from my head.
I found that later presentations became easier as well. For example, when I gave a workshop on an introduction to BIM at a local user group, I had about the same knowledge. That wasn't particularly scary, but I had about the same knowledge as one I'd previously given on Python GTK, where I was really on edge. So
But
it seems
I think the difference there perhaps was that you had recently discovered confidence. And so, oh, I've done this before.
yeah, for me the confidence just came.
Which is why they think it's easier, I think.
There was some mental hurdle that you needed to.
Yeah, maybe because it was so much less people and it wasn't being recorded and live streamed, it could be on the internet forever. If I managed to do that without making a fool of myself, I'd probably get it.
Yeah, actually, I think that's a good point. I think if you're going to start doing talks, it might be better to do one of the different. Yeah, because I think that, I mean, for me, I think a relatively experienced speaker, but once the videotaping of all talks became very common, I stopped doing them. And I think that if that were like extremely normal nowadays, I would never have given a talk in the first place. And so I think that one thing that's important is to do something really small with a friendly audience that maybe isn't recorded, because that's a huge barrier to think that like your first and primary talk could also be a massive failure that is then recorded for posterity forever.
Yeah.
Like that is really, really scary.
Yeah.
That is scary even for experienced speakers.
Yeah.
And so I think one of the things that Debian is doing now is they're making it quite clear to speakers that they don't necessarily have to have their talk recorded. They get options. Like you can have it full recording, you can have only audio with slides, you can have no recording. And I think that that's something that is worth also talking to conference organizers about. And if you're a woman, especially, don't be afraid to ask to not have it recorded.
Thanks a lot. But first of all, I console myself with my talk is that dad wants to watch the recording.
Oh, you've never had stalkers, maybe?
No. But the thing we're saying about practicing, and it combines with the small group thing, is if you've got a talk that you know you're going to give that you think is important, practice it in front of a friendly audience, and that'll force you to write your slides, and it'll force you to practice it. The other thing about starting off small, lightning talks, check-it-checks, things like that are ways to get your feet wet without as much of a commitment, and they're unlikely to be recorded for posterity, so it's a way to just quickly do something. Although short presentations can actually be more difficult.
That's true.
So, and the other thing that you said about learning, if you have something you want to learn, where I work, it's practically every day. Someone says, I want to learn something, you say, sign up for a talk, give a talk on it. I know nothing about it. Perfect.
One of the things on the recording, actually, one thing that I found quite helpful in identifying gaps in when I actually give a presentation is by recording myself.
Yeah.
But then they'll publish it. And so there are little interesting things that I notice when I do publishing. Like I have particular verbal tics that when I'm practicing on my own, they don't come out at all. But when I'm in front of the audience, I keep saying like one or two words again and again and again. And now I've identified that I say those sort of things. I'm actively working on stuff. Yeah, like so having a recording of your talk can be really useful. It can also be absolutely terrifying.
Yeah.
It's useful for self-improvement and terrifying for the other.
Yeah, I think definitely having a friend record your talk, even if it's not for the public conference recording, is an awesome idea.
I've set up a camera in front of me and recorded myself in discussion myself, and then I can take notes of where I'm not fluent, or when I get enthusiastic, I have a habit of my voice going up an octave. And so it's good for me to know when I'm likely to do that, to avoid doing it.
But the exciting bits of your talk deliberately people.
So I can be aware that I need to watch out for not half reaching the audience and press points.
Yeah, so but whatever else you do, I think it's a really good idea to really nail your first slide. Make sure you know what you can say on your first slide. Because at least with me, once I've started, it just gets easier.